Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. The webinar is QuickBooks Online for Beginners. My name is John Ripple, and I am a Canton, Ohio SCORE volunteer. Those of you that are not familiar with SCORE, SCORE is a nonprofit that has been around since 1964 and is a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. SCORE has helped more than 17 million entrepreneurs start, grow, or successfully exit a business. SCORE's mission is to foster a vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. There are over 240 chapters across the United States with over 10,000 volunteers. SCORE offers counseling that is free of charge and confidential to both nonprofit and for-profit businesses, as well as host workshops and webinars like the one today. So please reach out to your local SCORE chapter for guidance to help your business survive and grow. So several housekeeping items before we get started. If you do have a question during the webinar, please feel free to ask them through one of two tabs at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A tab as well as a raised hand tab. So write your question in there and the presenter will attempt to answer as many questions as possible through the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. You will be provided a link to this recording in case you would like to view this webinar at a future date. So with that, let's get started. Today's presenter is Ann Sharp. And Ann, I'll turn the platform over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Good morning, guys. My name is Ann Sharp. I'm the owner of Excellent Admin. Today, I'm going to teach you guys the beginning section of QuickBooks Online. The training course here is 3 for the general QuickBooks Online, so beginner, intermediate, and expert. And then the last class is for nonprofits that we're offering because QuickBooks Online has built a specific nonprofit portal. If you are new to QuickBooks Online or even considering changing over to QuickBooks Online, as QuickBooks Desktop cost has increased immensely as of September 1st. There is a sample that you can work with inside of QuickBooks Online to play around with it. It's very limited on the items that you can do. So I encourage you to sit through the 3 training courses because the way that I teach is that we are actually going to do everything on this list that we'll talk about here in a minute, live in person on this call. I'm a very visual person, hands-on. I teach that way. So we're going to kind of work through that. And then you guys will get a PowerPoint. And in that PowerPoint are step-by-step screenshots and instructions on how to do everything we're going to cover in each course. Okay. So between the recordings that you guys are going to get and the training PowerPoints, you have everything you need to be successful inside of QuickBooks. Now, I have been in business since 2016. My company specializes in bookkeeping. We work in QuickBooks primarily, whether it's desktop or online is kind of irrelevant. They're pretty similar in function. Obviously, we've been teaching online as QuickBooks Desktop is becoming what they consider obsolete, and more people are working in the online portal. And it does function a little bit differently. Okay. I have been working in QuickBooks for over 10 years, so I assure you that if you have a question, I probably can answer it. I might ask questions back to you to get a little more detail, as some of your questions might be specific, okay? Now, that being said, questions, I will look at the chat after we close out each section. That way, we're answering the questions that go along with that section, because if you ask a question as I start a section, I might answer it before I get to the end of it, okay? Now, this class is rather large. There's over 400 of you in here. So if we end up getting tons and tons of questions, I might hold some of them until the very end to make sure we have enough time to cover the content. And at the end of the session, I'll give you guys my contact information directly. So if I haven't been able to answer any of your questions in our allotted time, I'm sure we can go over a little bit, but obviously you can reach out to me directly on a more personal basis at that point, okay? And then if you need any additional support other than that, here's, Canton Scores information. They obviously can direct you to me as well, and we'll be able to get into communication, okay? So things we're going to cover today. we're going to start at the very, very beginning. We're going to sign up for a QuickBooks account. We're then going to talk about the importance of adding users and accountants. We're going to review our dashboard, which is going to change as we go through each session here. We're going to talk about chart of accounts. We're going to review reports. We're going to review some of the preferences we have. We're going to set up a bank account. We're going to learn the IRS standards for categorizations. We're going to manually enter transactions, work on creating rules. If you can't implement your bank, meaning sync it, for example, Huntington Bank, if you have a 3-token entry, meaning you have a company ID, a username, and a password, and then you get a token that you're supposed to do on your phone, sadly, that doesn't integrate with QuickBooks Online. So we will have to show you how you can import data to work around that lack of integration, and then obviously contact information. And I will reiterate as we go through the entire process here that QuickBooks Online is designed for the integration feature. So I'm going to tell you that the whole point of it is to streamline everything by getting all the data in one house and being able to categorize it to produce your pretty reports at the end, okay? So when we talk about QuickBooks has a couple packages. And so I'm going to toggle out of here now, and we're going to actually open. I work in Google Chrome. If you have Safari, that's totally fine. If you work in Microsoft Edge, that's fine too. My preference is Chrome, but you can work in all of the above as QuickBooks Online is a web-based platform, okay? So we're going to go in here, and I'm going to go to just QuickBooks Online, and I'm going to say pricing so we can look at the packages, okay? And obviously you want to make sure you're on a real QuickBooks site. So their pricing is changing. There's a package where you can get 30 days for free as a trial, which you get usually when you move your data from desktop to online. Or you can do where you get a certain amount of months at 50% off. And then obviously if you have an accountant, sometimes then accountants have a different package option too to save you money that way as well. So you have a couple options here. If you look at the Simple Start, Essential, and Plus, these are the 3 we tend to look at, okay? The Plus has all the bells and whistles. Advanced is like everything under the sun, and they give you all these features when you move from desktop to online at first for free for 30 days. Odds are most of us are going to need this Essential package. What we need is we need more than one user. Odds are you need yourself. If you have a partner, you might need them. And then obviously you'll need to be able to add your accountant. So you have 1 to 2 users that you're always going to need. Okay. You're going to have the ability to create invoices. You're going to want to be able to integrate more than one bank account. If you have a bank account, a credit card, or a loan, those are all things that you can integrate, obviously. And then you're going to want to be able to have the receipt capture. You want to be able to view reports. Some people may have sales tax. We'll talk, kind of dive into some of that stuff based on certain sections. But I tell people you can always start in the simple and upgrade to the middle, or start in the middle. And if you decide after looking at this list of all these individual features that you don't need these, then you can always downgrade. But the big reason a lot of people get pushed to the essentials is because you need to have more than one user, and you only have 1 users in the simple. Okay. So if you're the only one that does all your bookkeeping because you're a sole prop and you don't have any employees and you have nothing, you just send a report to your CPA at the end of the year, then you could probably do the Simple Start. We're going to work in essentials because, like I said, we need the multiple users. That's going to be the big thing. Okay. So if I choose this plan, then the second option is payroll. We don't teach payroll in this seminar. Payroll is its own animal and would need to be its own seminar. So we're going to continue without payroll. And then let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and see how it says you're connecting to Intuit, but you already have an account. You can click this if you already have an account, meaning that your desktop is registered into Intuit. You can obviously sign in this way. If you don't have an account, you would need to create one. Okay. I'm going to go through the activity of creating one because we should create one. And I'm going to use like a random email because obviously my emails are all taken with doing stuff for each class. Password is whatever you're comfortable with to make your life easier. And obviously it has to have a symbol, a number, uppercase, lowercase, pretty generic there. Phone number, make sure this is a textable number. because you obviously get security codes when you need certain things. So here it is already sending me my first code. So let me pick up my phone. And you'll get codes for random things, like when you log in on a new web address. So if you go home versus having an office, you'll get codes when you add users for security to make sure you're adding the proper user. Then it wants your payment method. So obviously it's $32.50 a month for 3 months. You see right here. And then it'll charge me only that. And then after that, it's going to go up to the 65 plus tax. So you just put in your credit card information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just long enough to type this in because this is recorded and we don't want you to see that. And then I'll bring the screen right back. Hmm. And all I'm doing is filling out all the information that it wants, obviously. All right, and then let me bring the screen back here. Okay, so now when you're setting up QuickBooks for the first time, if you've ever worked in QuickBooks, even desktop version, there's always wizards. So this is one of the wizards that's going to walk us through. So you have to hit get started. And then it's going to ask us for information that we're going to have to fill out for our business. Now, if you are moving from desktop, this information should be in here. You just have to confirm that it's in the proper spots, proper spelling, proper address, things like that. But because we're starting as if we don't own a file at all, and this is the first time we've ever opened a business, we're going to do it inside of here, okay? And I'm going to say excellent admin training. Okay, that's going to be our company name, so we know that this is a training file. And then it'll ask you things like, what are you using QuickBooks for? And you can say bookkeeping, this is new, you had desktop, whatever. We're going to say we had desktop to make life easy. And then again, it'll prompt you to bring your data up if you want to. We're going to say maybe later. I want to explore first. And then this is all the things we're going to go through, add your accountant, connect your bank accounts, manage bills, all that kind of stuff. So right now we're going to hit skip because I don't need to start any of those wizards because we want to go in order based on our outline in our PowerPoint. So now we're in an active, live, real QuickBooks file. And again, here are these wizards I told you about. We'll fight them the whole time we're doing this because it's a new file. And so they're going to pop up in kind of every area that we are. They're designed to be more helpful than hinder, but just know that sometimes you'll be annoyed by clicking all these X's. It goes away after about 30 days once you've been using it consistently. So don't panic. It's easy enough to work through. Okay. So now we have a file. We paid for it. We have 3 months and 50% off. It's going to automatically charge. I put a credit card on file, but you could do bank account if you wanted to. And then now there's like only basic data in here. Whatever QuickBooks thinks based on what we told it: industries, sole proprietorship, S corp, partnership. You tell it those types of things. Okay. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start up here at the gear icon. The gear icon here has our managed users section. So like I told you, our plan includes 3 full access users, and then you can have a couple accountants, okay? There is a difference between a user's access and an accountant's access. And I will show you at the very end some of those tidbit things that are a little bit different. It's where things are placed and some of the tools that the accountant has that you might not have, okay? When you look at your users, whoever created the account is going to have the full user access. You are the primary admin, you are active, you are billable, and obviously then you can change your access, delete it, whatever, right? Why would a user be important? A user is going to be majorly important in QuickBooks, okay? So in QuickBooks Online, it is very easy for you to maybe undo a transaction, click something maybe you didn't like. There could be duplicate transactions, which tends to happen when you're looking at sales deposits versus marking something paid inside of QuickBooks, okay? And so having a user means you're going to know who made the edit to the transaction, who made the quote unquote mistake, who put it in the wrong bucket, who deleted it by accident, those types of things. So if you have somebody else in here, whether it's an accountant or somebody on your team that helps with invoicing and things like that, if there's an error, as long as they have their own user, you'll be able to see who did it. That way, then you can go back and make the corrections properly. It's really important as an accountant that we have our own access, because at the end of the year, there might be entries we do to tie out your QuickBooks reports to your tax return. And then if you're like, well, wow, this entry looks wonky. Oh, it's a CPA entry from the end of the year. I don't need to worry about that because whatever he put in or she put in is exactly what it should be, right? So that's why it's important to have the users. Now, you can have specific access for specific users, and we'll go through that as we kind of add a user. Meaning, like, you can limit people to see certain things. So for example, I want my team to be able to help with certain things, marking payments paid, that type of thing, but I don't actually want them to see how much cash is in the bank. So I could say, well, you can't see the bank balances and you can't see the bank ledger because, in my opinion, that's none of their business, right? But you can create the invoices and mark them paid or do this and that, and that's okay. So you can toggle those things. Now it's not 100% personable, meaning every nitty gritty thing, it's like an all or nothing. If you don't want them to see bank accounts, they can't see credit cards. You can't see one or the other. So some of that you'll have to kind of work through based on trial and error. I tend to tell people start with less access and add more versus giving them everything under the sun unless you don't care, and that's okay too. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you click add user, and I'm gonna add my husband just as a person that's easy to add. And then down here, it says select role. So I could say a standard user, they only manage receivables, only manage payables, only limited to customer and vendors. They could be in-house accountant, a company admin, and time on, okay? Now, if I say company admin, then I still can go down here and edit. These are all permissions. So I can go in here and it'll tell me what they have the ability to do. So if you want them to have less access in one area, so you do accounts receivable, you can see that they can view, create, edit, and delete invoices. They have access to everything, right? Products and services, they have no access. Lists, they have no, you can see some of the things that they have access to. So again, you can customize this as you want. You could do track time only. A lot of times people just do like a standard all access unless you want them to be a company admin. Okay, this is the most common granted access here. Okay. And then you would hit send invitation. That person then gets an email so that they can create their own username and password and log in, because again, they're going to get security codes to log in, and you don't want them to have to ask you for a code to get into your profile when they need to be in their own profile. Okay. It's really easy if something changes, where you can see here it says resend invite. I can obviously see they haven't accepted the invite yet. If you click on this, I can delete the invite, delete the user. It's that simple. So if somebody separates with you, boom, they're out, their access is revoked. Their history is still there, meaning if they edited a transaction, you still have the ability to see they edit it, but they no longer can log in and see anything. They still have an Intuit account with whatever their username and password was that they created, but they don't have access to your file anymore. Same goes for accountants. You invite an accountant via just their email. They come in, and I'll invite myself because I'll be able to show you the difference then in the accesses. They get an email, they accept it, they add it to their practice portfolio, and so on and so on. And again, if for some reason they never accept it, you can see it. You can delete the access. You can see once they go from invited to accepted or active, you know, the verbiage change there. So you have the ability to see some of this information. Do we have any questions about why we need users, how we add users, or anything like that? See, there's some stuff in the chat, so we're going to take a peek. I'm going to scroll up to the top here. Let's see here.
And this is John. There is a question in the Q&A. I think it's very pertinent. It says, I have a primary admin who is no longer here, and it does not allow me to delete that person or change my setting to primary from admin. How do I delete a primary?
So you have to strip them of the primary access. So underneath where the primary admin is, so if you can still see my screen,
Yeah.
if you click, is it edit? Let me hit back. Hold on. I think it's the three bubbles. There is the ability to change. You have to be logged in as the primary admin. That's going to be the first thing. So you're going to have to get their credentials, or you could call into it and they can help you. But you basically need to invite yourself as the primary admin, which means they have to transfer it to you. It's not a hard process other than that it has to be initiated from their portal. And then once they initiate that transfer, then you accept it via email. You get an email, you accept primary admin, and then you're able to delete that other user. So hopefully it's somebody that maybe you are still on good terms with and you can interact with them just to have them. They click these three buttons, this little three button here, and it will tell them transfer primary admin. And then they can transfer it and they select out of the list of other users here who that is. And then, like I said, you'll get an email. Looks like we have a lot of note takers in here. Elizabeth, your question is there a special rate for QuickBooks for nonprofits? There is. They have different pricing. Let's see here. Are you guys seeing me actually logged into QuickBooks Online? It looks like maybe everybody is only seeing the slideshow.
Anna, this is John. I can see your actual log, your QuickBooks.
Okay, I just want to make sure as I'm scrolling up, some of these are from early on that might be when everybody was kind of saying good morning, making sure I'm addressing everything. QuickBooks should work in Foxfire. I don't see why it wouldn't work. Elizabeth, you can share your password with the accountant for a cheaper plan, but accountants tend not to want that information. You'd be better off just to print them financials at that point. Yes, Laura, you are correct. You get one accountant no matter what plan you're in, as long as you add them as an actual accountant. Terry, Quicken and QuickBooks don't integrate together. So if you're using Quicken, Quicken is its own software separate from QuickBooks. If your bank account is linked for the desktop version and you go to QuickBooks Online, your desktop version will still auto charge unless you get in and cancel it, but it does not transfer that billing information into QuickBooks Online. You still have to re-enter it. Accountants get basically the same access as primary access when you add them. So they're for primary admin. Joe, that's Joseph, that's something you have to determine is if you are the only person in it, you might not need additional users at this time and you could do the simple start. Pat, if you add somebody that already has an Intuit account, when they get the email that says to accept access, at the very top on that screen, instead of trying to create new credentials, which is what it's going to prompt them to do, there is a small little line that's probably 8-point font that says already have an Intuit account, sign in. And they need to do that in order to be able to access your account without needing new credentials. If you have more than one small business, you need more than one QuickBooks Online account, which means you're paying for multiple subscriptions. And then you would be able to sync them all into one Intuit account, and you would be able to see a drop down and toggle between the companies that way. So you could still have one username and password, but you would need 3 subscriptions to QuickBooks Online. That is the downfall from QuickBooks Desktop versus QuickBooks Online. Yes, if you don't actually have a business name yet when you set it up, you can just use your name and change it later. We'll talk about under preferences some of those things that we can edit. Okay, guys, I'm gonna jump into the next section, and then any questions that were missed, we'll take a peek at the end of class. Again, save the chats and stuff for questions. That way it's easier for us to see. So we're gonna talk about reviewing our dashboard now, okay? So our dashboard is what you see when you first log in. Obviously, we're gonna work a lot in this black navigation bar here over on the left-hand side. So obviously we have a dashboard button, you have a home option. So here is what our dashboard looks like. Now our dashboard at the moment shows nothing of relevance, meaning we haven't implemented anything inside of QuickBooks for this dashboard to show us income, invoices, customers, bank balance, profits, expenses, all the fun charts that people like to see, okay? Obviously, it's kind of trying to prompt us to bring your data in because we told it we had used desktop in the past, okay? You have a customized layout, so all these widgets can be moved around, trashed. You can bring them back, you know, whatever you want somebody to see. Okay. Banks, we have obviously not linked a bank account, but you'll be able to see a bank account once we link one here. Okay. Profit and loss. Again, this is going to be income versus expenses. And as we go through today's class of setting things up, you'll see that these empty widgets and empty dashboard starts to turn into things. And it's going to continue to turn into things as we go through the whole training seminars. Okay. Again, you can get invoices here. Some of these are like shortcuts to parts of QuickBooks. Okay. The cash flow aspect of this obviously tells you how money's doing. Again, we don't have anything in here yet, so this is just a sample. You can see it says sample. Tells you to link your bank account again, can give you monthly overlooks. So if you're keeping up with your QuickBooks on a regular basis, not monthly, but maybe more like bi-weekly, these numbers are going to be pretty accurate for you for the things that you're going to want to look at. And then you have a planner where you can work to figure out real-time cash flow, you know, those types of things. Again, this is kind of a wizard that QuickBooks is offering as a service for you to use. But 90% of the time when you log in, you're just going to see your home screen. Okay. Now, if you use QuickBooks Online to create like invoices like on the spot, sometimes I get the complaint of like, I don't want a customer to be standing behind the computer with me and be able to see my bank account. So that would be why you would want to change this layout and you would want to delete this wizard part here. And honestly, I probably would delete profit and loss too, because if you don't want them to see your bank balance, you don't want them to see how much money you've made for the year type of thing, right? And so some of those types of things would be why you change these wizards, okay? Any questions about the dashboard? Cindy, it depends on the company, whether they use QuickBooks or not. I would venture to bet that I have some clients that probably have 100 employees that use it, but they definitely don't run payroll inside of here. Yes, for clarification, if you have 3 businesses when working in QuickBooks Online, you would need 3 different QuickBooks accounts. I don't know if they have a tutorial or cheat videos for beginners, but there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. Robin, we'll talk more about your dilemma with moving money between companies when we actually get into categorizing. Yes, if you have multiple entities under the same parent company and use the same Intuit account, can I consolidate financials? Yes, you would use something called classes. We'll talk about that as we get farther in. If you move the widgets on your login, it does not change it for other users. They have to do it for themselves. That is a custom feature that you do for each login. Does Planner have an additional fee? I do not believe so, Jamie. It's not that you have to set up the dashboard for each users. They'll have all the generic stuff originally, but if you want to delete things for your user, then yes, you would have to change it for an additional user if you want their access to match yours or their view to match yours. Antonio, depends on the software you're using about the integration. Some do, some don't. Roberta, Intuit QuickBooks is QuickBooks. Intuit is like their parent company that they use. So you get an email from Intuit. Intuit's who calls you. They're like their support, but QuickBooks is the software name, but Intuit is the brand. It's all the same. Okay, perfect. So it looks like I answered all the questions based on what we've covered so far. Okay, so let's talk about chart of accounts. So if you go into transactions here over on our left-hand side bar, like I told you, we're going to play here in the transactions. So transactions is going to show bank transactions, receipts is something we're going to talk about, reconciliation we'll talk about, rules we'll talk about, chart of accounts we'll talk about, and reoccurring transactions we'll talk about. Maybe not all today, but as you can tell, this transactions tab, we use almost all of these items here, okay? So the one we're going to talk about now is chart of accounts. So in QuickBooks right now, based on whatever type of company we told QuickBooks we were, we have implemented a chart of accounts. These are just the generic, most common used accounts based on whatever type of entity you told them you were. Small corporation, sole proprietorship, some of those types of things. Okay, so you have owner's investment, owner's pay. You're gonna have undeposited funds, which plays into income, uncategorized assets, retained earnings, then it said a couple income accounts as options, and then obviously the most used accounts, advertising and marketing, bank fees, cars and trucks, contractors, insurance, and so on and so on. Okay. Some of these you're going to use, some of these you're not going to use, some of these you're going to need additional accounts for. Okay. So I always tell people the big thing we want to work with is adding an account. So over here, you can click new. I'm going to shift this out of our way here. And then this is going to be how we add a new account. So you can add a new account in multiple ways. This is the first way we're going to talk about adding a new account. Okay. So one of the accounts that I might want to add is going to be that I like to track my utilities, not as just a utility charge, but by the utility. Okay. So one of the utilities I would have is going to be Spectrum. So when it comes to type of account, I'm going to look down here through all these options. Receivable, no. Other assets, no. It's not a bank account, not a fixed asset, not a credit card. It's not income, it's an expense. And then the type of expense down here, then I'm going to select, you want utilities is what you're looking for because Spectrum is a utility. Okay. And then you can put a description in here if you want. I particularly don't need one because I know what Spectrum is in my office, but if you didn't know what it was, you might want to put it in, or if you have a car payment, a description would be good for a car payment. You could put 2005 Honda Accord, whatever your vehicle is, so that you knew that that was what the car payment was for. And then down here, you want to hit save. Okay. Now it brings you back to your main page. For our subscription, you have 250 accounts that you can create in here. The ones that are already created in here don't count. So they're like freebies. So you can customize your reports to what you want to see or track up to 250 accounts in the subscription we're in. Okay. So now, because I added a new account, I can type in Spectrum and here's my account. It shows that it's here. Okay. Now, if you are a franchise per se, and your franchise controls the way they want your financials to look, meaning they want you to categorize things in certain buckets based on what they're looking for planning. They might give you a chart of accounts. So you would then be able to import that chart of accounts. And if you import that chart of accounts, it's got to be a CSV, an Excel file, okay, in order to do it. Or they're working on the implementation here of a Google Sheet. So you can integrate with Google Sheet. I have not actually ever done anything with the Google Sheet world because I don't use it for financials, obviously. But if you're a big Google user and use Google Sheets, you can obviously connect your Google Sheet into QuickBooks now. If you're moving from desktop to online, but don't want to bring the data, For example, if you purchase the business and you just want the actual chart of accounts, you could import that as well because you can export the list out of desktop and import it into QuickBooks Online. You can do that if, that's another example other than being maybe on a franchise that would allow you to want to import it. Otherwise, you can kind of create them as you need them and use the ones that you already have. And we'll talk about another way to create some of these once we've actually integrated our bank account. Okay. So there's a couple ways to do it. This is the easiest way if you're trying to pecking order certain things and adding them one at a time. If you need bulk entry, that's what the import tool is going to be for. And then obviously, as you're starting to categorize, you can enter them from the categorization screen, which we'll go over when we actually start to do that feature. Okay. Any questions so far about chart of accounts and how we would add things in there? Is it possible to link multiple bank accounts under the single business? Yes, it is. That is possible. Yes, we can add custom expenses. Yes, so if you click run report here, it shows you all your accounts you have listed here and the type it's categorized and the sub accounts. This is the new view. Some of you might see it this way. You can toggle between the standard view and the old view. But yes, if you click run report, you can see your entire list. You can also click print here and you would be able to see most of it in that print as well. Joe, CSV is like an Excel document or a text document. It's just a format that you download in. Carla, what info do you need on a Google Sheet to be able to be importing? It will prompt you that way when you click on it. I'm assuming you'll have to select the columns that you're going to be importing because you might not need everything there. No, if you're importing from desktop into online and you've condensed it in the past, everything that's in the desktop version should be what comes up in the online version. So anything that you had either excluded or condensed in the past will show here, but it won't affect it. Yes, if you wanted to start using QuickBooks, but you had already had expenses prior, you would be able to backdate that data. You would use your chart of accounts to categorize your payables, but not your receivables. Your receivables are under the items, which we talk about in the next class. That's a preference up to you on a complex chart of accounts if you want to use number systems or not. It's a feature under preferences that we'll talk about that you can add it in. It's just a check of a box to say you want to use it that way. Katie, you don't have to have the last year locked. It is a great feature and you can actually do it. I don't think just the accountant can do it, but that's again a preference for you. Square can be added as an income and an expense. You just have to change the name, meaning it can't say square, it has to say square income or square expense, which personally, if you're using the same company for both, you're going to want to be able to see the difference anyways. Yes, you can track credit cards with multiple credit cards. It does make sense to keep your chart of accounts down for things you don't use. That being said, some of the accounts that come automatically, QuickBooks doesn't allow you to delete. For their safety or framework building, some of them you can't hide them or archive them or delete them. Katie, you can put under the subscriptions, like the detail that you want, where the income's coming from, or you can make all those different income accounts. That's going to tie less into chart of accounts and more into sales, pending how you're actually doing income. So we'll talk more about that when we get into that module. QuickBooks balance versus bank balance we'll talk about when we get into the checking account stuff. Okay, perfect. So now let's talk about reviewing reports. So today's class is designed about learning the framework to get everything set up so that in the next class we can actually start implementing some of the things we're talking about. So one of the things we like to look at is reports. A lot of times QuickBooks has an overwhelming amount of reports, okay? So if you go over to the black bar over here and click reports, QuickBooks tries to make it easy for us. It stars probably the 3 most common reports we're going to use. Okay. That keeps them at the top, makes life easier for us. The most reports I'm going to see people use are going to be a profit and loss. That's what you would give your accountant at the end of the year for tax prep. In a balance sheet, that's going to show income, debt, loans, credit cards, and obviously your money you've put in or taken out of the business. Okay. And then if you do invoicing inside of QuickBooks, then you're going to have a receivables report. That's going to tell you how much money you have out and waiting to be collected, or if you've already collected it, then you'll see that on the profit and loss, okay? But QuickBooks has all of these reports down here. So you could go dig in for days for numbers of reports that you want. Some of them don't pertain anything that we're going to do inside of the training classes at all, but might be a customized report that you want to work at later. Obviously, these are under standard reports. If you go to custom reports, those would be things that you would be able to build. And then management reports, these are going to be, again, high-level reports. But most of the time, these 3 reports, and the other report I would probably add in here is going to be a payables report. If you're going to actually enter bills into QuickBooks and mark them paid because you might cut checks, that would probably be the 4th report that I would put in here. So if I was going to look at that, I would go to payables. And then you can type in here and find it. If you want to star it, you have to go down and find it here at the bottom. So there's receivables. Here's payables. So I would star that report so that it comes up here in the top. These, again, from a starred perspective, that means it's favorites. So it's under this module here. You don't need to go digging. Are customized based on your login. So if you unstar something, somebody else that logs in will have whatever their stars were, but you would have lost it and need to go find it again to star it. Again, super easy. You just unstar it and it goes away. So the reports we're going to use the most in this class specifically are going to be a profit and loss. If I click on this profit and loss, you can see You can do all dates. You can do this month. You could do last month. You could do this year. You have a lot of options here. You also can type in here. So if I wanted to do just Q2 to current or Q3 to current, I can obviously do that. You have cash accrual, you have comparisons, totals, all that kind of stuff, and you can click run report. We obviously at the moment don't have anything here, but we want to look at the reports while there's nothing here to play with these features here. And then as we start adding transactions, we'll come back and look at reports now that it'll have data in it, okay? You can print, email, or download your report. And then again, you can change any of the time frames here, totals, anything here, any of the customization features you might be looking for. If you're looking at previous comparisons, all that stuff's here. And then 90% of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be cash basis. The reason for that is because most businesses file cash basis. If you are accrual, then obviously accrual reporting is going to be what you need, but most of us are going to file in the cash world. Okay. Now, the profit and loss is going to show everything that you spent out expense-wise and all the cash that you brought in. If you pull it for accrual, this could be cash that you're expecting to get in but hasn't actually been paid on yet. And bills that maybe have not been actually paid yet, but you've put in QuickBooks are going to show on the accrual report. So cash and accrual reporting are going to have different numbers. Usually accrual has a larger sales number because obviously you have invoices created that aren't marked paid yet. Cash basis is going to have less cash, but also could have less expenses if you haven't paid all your bills yet. Okay. So there is a difference between that. Because the profit and loss is everything that's categorized and everything that you've already paid for. Okay. When we look at our balance sheet, which is our other report we tend to look at, we want to make sure that everything ties through. So if you look at a P&L and see a negative number somewhere that maybe shouldn't be negative, then we know something's wrong. Something's either categorized wrong, a sales item might be created wrong, and so on and so on. If we look at another report, if we go to our balance sheet here, and say our balance sheet again has nothing in it at the moment, but our balance sheet were to have a negative cash balance in the bank, unless your bank account is really overdrawn, something would be wrong. Okay. So we look at these reports because these reports can tell us if we're missing something inside of our bank account transaction wise, but also tell us if something's in the wrong category or wrong place, or we've set up something wrong. So QuickBooks Online does what I will call mapping through our entire training process. And mapping meaning when you have a sales item and you say you sell taxes, for example, and you want that to go into tax income, but somehow it ends up down on an expense category, you'll see a negative number there. So you would be able to see that something is wrong. If you have a negative credit card, this tells me that we put a payment on a credit card but didn't put the expenses in to either zero it out or create charges on the credit card. If you have a negative loan, this tells me we might be mixing an asset that we bought with the loan. So the car is the asset, the loan on the car is what the debt is, right? And we need to fix those things. So if the balance sheet has a negative or a wonky number on it, then our profit and loss can't possibly be correct. And if our profit and loss has a wonky number on it, then sometimes our balance sheet is incorrect. So they tie together. So that's why we talk about the reports, so that you can see where they are. And then we'll now start building data into these reports so that we can come back and look at them and see how everything is framing out and showing in all of this. Okay. Any questions about how we create favorite reports, what reports we're going to look at the most, or why we would need the reports? So Joe, how do you create the reports? You go into the black bar and go to reports. And then you just click on it. And as we have data in here, the reports will generate based on a period of time that you tell it. Guys, I'm noticing in the chat, there's a lot of questions that are way more advanced, even topics we're not even going to cover in this class. So I'm ignoring those questions. It's not that I'm ignoring you. I'm trying to keep us on task. Those questions, again, when you guys got the outline on the classes, show you what's in each class. So if you have an item that needs to be talked about, those items will be talked about in the class section. So hold those questions. Some of you guys, obviously, I can tell based on your questions, are actively working in QuickBooks. Today's class is designed for those that are trying to figure out if this is going to work for them, and then obviously how you kind of get it set up, okay? Now, we talked about there's preferences in QuickBooks, okay? So I want to talk about some of the preferences. So again, if we go up to our gear icon here, this is a lot of our stuff that we're going to be working through, okay? So accounts and settings is our big preference. In here is the ability to do things like change your company name, add a logo. So as you can see, if I click this pencil here, then I can add my logo. I can change my company name. You can add an EIN in here, okay? If you're going to do tax forms in here, you can have it as the same or not, okay? And then you can hit save or cancel. Down here, you can tell it what type of company you are. We have it as a sole proprietor right now, but you have other options. Remember, I've been telling you guys that as well. And then you can tell it an industry. If you tell it an industry, it might have accounts that go into that industry. So for example, if you're in construction, then one of the accounts it might have is in construction income instead of just service income. Okay. So it might help you. You can edit the email. So like obviously this email is not a professional email. It's a personal email. So if I wanted the customers to be able to email me, I would not use this email. I would do my a@excellentadmin email. Okay. If you have a company phone number that's different than your personal phone number, and if you have a website, this information here is very important because everything you fill out in this area is going to show on your invoices. So if you load a logo, it's going to show on your invoice. Your name is going to show on an invoice. Your phone number, website, all that's going to show on an invoice. The address is going to show on your invoice, right? So you want to make sure that this is the stuff you want people to see, because if you do this properly from the framework perspective, it's less work later for you. Now, if your address changes, your phone number changes, the business name changes, you can change all of that. That's the whole point of the pencils, right? Okay. So this is just your generic account setting. This is your preferences as the company. So setting it up and all of those types of things. Okay. Payments. This is if you want to take payments from QuickBooks. This is if you're going to use their payment processing. There is a separate fee if you run payments through QuickBooks. Not only is there a fee they take when you run the payment, but there's a monthly fee to be able to do it. And there's a whole nother implementation part of this. So this isn't your payments to pay for your subscription. This is a different thing for you to take payments from customers, okay? Usage. This is going to tell you how many users do you have set up? What's your chart of accounts look like? Are you using tags? We'll talk about tags way later in this process, okay? And then it tells you what your stuff is. So if you need more users, then you've got to contact them to upgrade type of thing, okay? QuickBooks offers bank accounts now. That's what the QuickBooks checking is. Sales. This is going to be what are your preferred terms on your invoices? Do you have discounts? Are you going to show different currencies, late fees, if you have messaging, reminders, statements, all that kind of stuff? Again, all these are customization features based on whatever you're doing with your company, okay? Expenses, this is if you need purchase orders. If you need purchase orders, you have to upgrade to the $90 QuickBooks because they don't offer them in this version of QuickBooks, and they don't offer them in the Simple Start either. Again, when we kind of looked at that, purchase orders are something that are a customized feature that some companies use and some don't. So if it's something that you need, then you would have to click the upgrade button in order to get it, obviously. Time, this is if you have certain work or you're going to use timesheets, those types of things that ties into payroll, obviously. And then advanced settings, this tells you what your calendar or fiscal year is. If you have a tax form you want them to know. If you want to change the currencies we talked about, obviously, those types of things. So this has, again, more areas to be customized. Some of us that end in The fiscal year is September. You would want that not to be January to December. So when you pull reports, you pull your P&L, right? It's your correct year when you pull last fiscal year. And not just January through December. And then if you're a nonprofit, obviously you want it to be June to July. And so you want to have these things set up properly so that you can look at your reports more accurately. Okay. The other area you want to look at, and they kind of split out from a preferences perspective, is here under the gear icon, still in the same area, just not under accounts and settings. You have subscriptions and billing. Okay. This is where you can tell what subscription you're going to do. So if you need to view your payment history, downgrade your plan, you want to cancel, you want to upgrade, or you want to switch to annual billing. Okay. This is where you can do it. This tells you what the credit card on file ending numbers would be when it expires. Again, you can edit this. And then if you ever needed help or support from Intuit, they would want your company ID. This is a way to find your company ID. There's a Control F, I think 4, we'll bring it up on your screen too. If you ever need to contact them, they can tell you how to do the control one, but this is an easy way to see it, okay, when you're looking at that. Obviously, under gear icon here, you have a lot of options. So this is another just navigation bar to get around your QuickBooks. I primary focus on using the black bar the most, but that doesn't mean that you can't be more comfortable to get to your chart of accounts from using the gear icon. Okay. There are multiple ways to get to any of the items we're going to discuss in QuickBooks. There's also multiple ways to enter, change, and edit things. And we're going to cover as many different options of those as we can through this process. But because there are so many different ways, it just is where you're comfortable with working with. I try to do the simple way, which is this bar never goes away. You don't have to remember to toggle anywhere. And so this is the bar we're going to play in the most. And again, down here at the very bottom, you can hit manage settings here, and you can add certain things to customize this menu. So if you want to take away things you're never going to use and add things that you do want to use, you can do that as well to make it easier for you to find some of those items. So those are the areas that have the preferences for you, to make it as, personalized as possible. Now, when we do invoicing and some of those other things later on, there are additional preferences with creating your invoice to look the way you want it to look, or have the columns you want it to have, or naming and that type of thing. Obviously, those are things that we'll work with as we get into those for additional preferences. Any questions about reviewing any of the preferences we've talked about? Vicky, the EIN can show on the invoice. It can also be hidden on the invoice. That is up to you. That is done when we get into actually invoicing. If you put it in QuickBooks, it doesn't mean it always populates. There's a box inside of the invoice to say you want it to show. Richard, QuickBooks phone support is hit or miss. You usually have to put in a ticket and they call you, because that way then they have your company ID and know why they're calling you to work through that support. Pending your package with QuickBooks, whether you're simple start all the way to the advanced, they have different support levels there. Jamie, for the fees, so there's a monthly subscription fee to be able to take processing through QuickBooks, whether it's credit cards, ACHs, and whatever else, but you're sending an invoice to a customer. The customer can click pay now and then pay you in whatever form. They also then take a fee from whatever the payment form was. So if it's credit card, it could be 3% of that credit card fee. So you're paying a monthly subscription fee to have it, and then you're also paying the fee in whatever the processing fee is for them to run the card. Christine, for the customization, if you go in the black bar and go all the way to the bottom, it says manage settings, and then it says customize this menu. Cindy, when you run a report to print, does it go to Excel? No, it goes to PDF. To print it, you can download it into Excel though. So to get back to the preferences, you click on the gear icon and then accounts and settings. And that brings up all the items to edit, company name and everything like that. To get to the billing, again, gear icon, subscriptions and billing. Guys, there is an intermediate class after this. It's next. We're running classes for QuickBooks beginners, intermediate, and pro the first 3 weeks of September. So today is week 1, next Thursday is week 2, and the Thursday after that is week 3. Okay. So now we're going to talk about setting up a bank account. Okay, because obviously preferences and everything is great. If we've got all this set up, we're ready to start integrating our data in here. Okay, so let's go into setting a bank account. So how would we do that? We're going to go back to our black navigation bar here, and we're going to go to transactions. Now it's going to default to where we were at last, which was chart of accounts. And so we want to go back to bank transactions. And it's going to open a page that again brings us to kind of a wizard that we have to work through because we don't have anything integrated. If you bring data from desktop to online, you might already have data that shows here. Okay, but if you don't, it's okay. We're going to click connect an account. Now, QuickBooks links with like, I would say 85% of the banks out there. There are a few that don't link because they're not set up or they might be credit unions. That's not saying all credit unions don't link because there are credit unions that do link, but sometimes the smaller banks don't do. Credit One Bank is one that does not link in here at all. But you know, majority of them do link. That doesn't mean there aren't hurdles when you're linking your bank account. So I want to specify that a little bit. I want to talk about if you have Huntington and it has the 3 credential login, you don't link unless you have only a username and password login as well, because you can have both at Huntington. If you have a credit card with multiple users, you're going to have some loops you have to jump through when you're linking that information as well. But for a majority of it, sometimes KeyBank, you have to actually log into your bank account and tell them that it's okay to integrate into QuickBooks. So that would be one that you might have some hurdles with. But this wizard is going to kind of walk you through all of those things, okay? Now we're 9 months into the year. So if I was just now deciding to implement QuickBooks, but I have been running business for 9 months, I need to backdate data all the way back to January. Okay, which means there's going to be a lot of data in here for us to play with. So we're going to work through some of that. I'm going to try to do, let's start with Capital One. Now I have password software. So as you can see, I have the little 3 wizard here. So a lot of my stuff is auto-populating. I do that because I don't want my team to have clients' passwords, but also I want to be able to do this with you guys without having to click on and off with the screen. So bear with me. So obviously I want to go into Capital One. Capital One, for what I'm integrating right now, is going to be a credit card. Okay, so we're going to do a credit card, then we'll do a bank account. So I type in my username and password. And it says, would I like Intuit to access my information? The answer is yes. And then obviously, yes, I want all of the above here. I only have one credit card there, so it's okay. So these are all the security features I was telling you about this. Some banks are going to have, some banks are not going to have. Some of them you can do from inside of QuickBooks. Some of them you have to do from inside of the bank. So keep in mind, not all of them are done this way either, okay? So this tells me my maximum availability is I could go back to June 8th. I can't go back to January, so that means I will have some manual entry we'll have to do, but I'm going to go back to June 8th because that's my max availability. This is a credit card, so it is clicking and syncing as a credit card. So I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. And it's going to take it a minute to bring the transactions in. Obviously, it's thinking. Again, a wizard that's popping up. So this tells me that I have 115 transactions that I would need to categorize, okay? And now you'll see instead of being a screen to prompt me to link an account, I have an account linked here, okay? So now if I want to link another account, I don't have that like wizard right in the middle of the screen anymore, right? So I have link account over here. Brings me back to pick another link. And then let's do, let's see what would be another easier bank here to work with. Let's do PNC. And then obviously you can see here, there's multiple accounts listed. I'm focused on just doing the business checking at this point. The PNC allowed me to authorize it, again, through their wizard here. It is a checking account, so it recognizes that. And again, the max availability is the 8th. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with what I've got. And like I said, some take a little bit longer than others when it's loading this process. Just depends on how many transactions you're potentially bringing in at any given point. Here, look, one of our wizards has started to populate based on things it thinks it should be done. So now you'll see that there's 286 transactions to be categorized, okay? So now we've set up a credit card and a checking account. Obviously, if you have loans that have an online portal, you can sync the loans. If you have credit cards that have multiple users, we would sync all of that kind of thing. There's a little bit more depth with some of that as we get into working through additional things. But it'll tell you when it updated last. It tells you what the bank balance is versus what QuickBooks says your balance is, okay? Once there's nothing to be categorized, so not this 115 or this 268, you should have within a couple $100 of a QuickBooks balance to a bank balance. What would create a discrepancy between these two numbers would be if you've printed checks. Your QuickBooks balance would be less than your bank balance because the checks maybe have not cleared yet. But if you're not doing anything like that, then they should be within a couple $100 of each other or match. And if they match, then you know you have captured everything. If they don't match, then either you've got a ton of stuff not categorized yet, or there's something else that could be going on. Okay. So definitely something we'll work through as we start to actually categorize and do some of those transactions. But today we just wanted to get the stuff integrated and learn how to set it up. That way, those of you that are doing this for the first time can do it on your own before the next class, so that when we get into the next step of things, you have the ability to do that. Okay. You can upload from a file, meaning if your bank does not integrate, you can port it that way. And then you can manage connections from this little down arrow here next to link accounts. This is obviously, again, how it goes. If you click on this little pencil here, you can change your sign-in information if your username and password changes, or you can rename the account something that you want. If you click edit account information, you can say, instead of this business checking, you can say PNC checking. I tend to like to leave the last four numbers of the account number. That way, no matter who's in here, you know you're working in the right account. Again, if your account gets closed because of fraud or something like that, you might need to rename it. And then obviously down here is a way to disconnect it if it's something that this account becomes obsolete. So once you've categorized everything, you can disconnect it because it doesn't need to populate here. Okay. You also have this drop down here, so you can hide. You can choose to hide these bubbles here and just drop down and toggle. I personally like to see the boxes instead of using the drop down, but you might have both views. And this wizard here is just taking up room, so you can click out of it. And then obviously where it says 115 transactions, obviously they're all sitting down here to be categorized. And we will talk about that more in the next class. Any questions about syncing an account or credit card? Mari, there are issues with QuickBooks linking sometimes. We'll kind of work through those. If you want to reach out individually, I'm happy to see if I can't help you with that. Joe, I don't know that I understand your question, but it kind of plays more into things that we'll talk about a little bit later in today's class. Okay, looks like I've looked at all of the chat stuff. Let me see if there's some Q&A stuff in here. Okay, perfect. All right. I'm going to have us take about a 15-minute break right now before we talk into the next category. The next category we're going to talk about is learning the IRS standards for categorizing expenses properly. So now that we have our data in here, we need to figure out where it goes and make sure that we're following the standards, and obviously then have some of the customization that we want in this process. So while going over this, obviously, we will do some categorization as well. We will answer some of the manually entering transaction questions that are coming up and some of those types of things as well. But let's take a 15-minute break, go use the bathroom, get something to drink, and then we will come back at 10:37. A few stragglers. Just another minute here. Saw a lot of questions in the chat. So I wrote in there some of the repeat questions. Yes, this class is being recorded, which was stated at the beginning. Yes, you will get a recording of the class at the end. Gwen will send that out to everybody who is actively in the class. Yes, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint that I have been referencing. Obviously, I'm using the live screen in this process. The PowerPoint has been dropped periodically throughout the chat, so you're welcome to go back up and find it. If not, I'm sure Gwen can drop it at the very end for us. And then class today is from 9 to noon. All of our training sessions for the month of September are on Thursdays, 9 to noon. We will talk about what's in the next class at the very end if we have the extra time to go over the outline, so that if you can attend the next class, obviously you know what's coming up. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here, and I'm going to share my screen again with you guys. So we're going to spend the next half an hour or so talking about learning how to categorize. Um, Categorizing is really, excuse me, really important when you're looking at where things go, to make sure they're in the proper buckets. Not only so you understand what's going in those buckets as the owner or the person doing the bookkeeping, but so you can explain to the end user what's in those buckets. But then obviously you still have some ability to have some customization on certain things. Okay. Um, these are the IRS regulated buckets. So it tells you what the name of the business expense could be and then gives you some examples of what those things might be that go in that bucket. And we're going to go through these. This is not every end all be all one. This is the main generic ones that if you look up on the IRS website come into play. And honestly, that's usually about the only place I look for data as a fellow bookkeeper slash accountant, to find the things that are relevant to what's going on with the world. Obviously, things have changed with COVID and things like that through the years with bookkeeping and expense tracking. Okay. Now, if at the end of the day you put something in the wrong bucket, it's not the end of the world. But obviously, for audit purposes and things like that, you'd like to keep it consistent and put things in the proper buckets. Okay. Obviously, anything you put in QuickBooks, you can move, edit, delete, change, and we'll talk about those obviously as we move through. But for right now, we're going to talk about just learning how to categorize, and then I'll teach you how to actually do it inside of QuickBooks after we've gone over the categories. Okay. So, employee wages. This is salaries, payrolls, bonuses, commissions, sick pay, any of those types of things. Um, the employee wage. Okay. Now, if as an owner, if you take a salary, you would want to keep your wage separate. Uh, Mostly for sales purposes, not because it skews the number of employee wages, because you are an employee of your company, right? But if you were to go to sell, somebody's going to want to know how much you were paid as the owner who would be looking to buy your company. Also, certain types of tax returns have a difference, where it says owner's compensation versus employee compensation. So your CPA might need to see the difference. Okay. So you definitely want to have that. Again, you could have some additional detail here if you want to know what's regular pay versus commissions, bonuses, or sick time. Obviously, you can track that. You can make sub accounts, is what we would call them, to that account. Okay. Education expenses. This could be if your company offers reimbursement for tuitions, books, and other expenses like that. This could be if you're a dental hygienist and you have to go do your continuing education every year, or you're a hairstylist and they had to go take a class on the newest nail or color pattern or the trend right now. Okay. You would have some education expenses. The benefits, this could be health insurance, if you have cafeteria plans, life insurance, some of those types of things. Obviously, again, something that you could have sub accounts for the different items. Some people like to see health insurance versus life insurance. So you definitely want to be able to see that. Rent expense, if you rent an office, if you rent equipment, if you lease a warehouse, you have vehicle leases, those types of things can go under rent expense, storage, rent, the list goes on. You might want to have sub accounts for different things. Like I personally would want to know what I'm renting in equipment if my job is very labor intensive and relies solely on equipment. So if I did construction, concrete, landscaping, those types of things, I want to know how much I'm paying to rent equipment versus if I just bought it myself. You would want to be able to track that. Obviously, office rent, it could be a fixed dollar amount for a certain period of time. So you would be able to do that. Leases tend to be a fixed dollar amount. But obviously, again, you could create sub accounts there. Taxes, this could be property tax, taxes on vehicles, equipment purchases, any of those types of things. You definitely want to keep it separate. That way you can tell the difference in what you're paying for. Business interest or debt. So this could be loans, lines of credit, credit cards, those types of things. You obviously want to track it. The reason we track this separately is because for loans and things like that, you get an interest statement at the end of the year. So you need to make sure that it ties out. Payroll taxes. So there's a few sections of this. There is the employee portion that you're withholding for your employee and paying on their behalf. And then there's the employer portion. So the unemployment is the employer portion, federal and state. And then obviously you pay half of Social Security and Medicare. So you would want to track at least a minimum of the employer portion versus the employee portion. But some companies have it where it says Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, federal, and state. Obviously, like you have it all sectioned out, and that's okay too. If you do payroll inside of QuickBooks, some of that's going to do it on its own because of the way they have it mapped out. Some of it, obviously, you have to set up if you use a payroll service. Okay. Real estate taxes, this is property taxes. Um, I will say if you are a rental company, I would say QuickBooks is probably not your best software. There tend to be softwares based on certain industries that are better. Um, you have to track real estate by each individual property, and that makes QuickBooks a little bit harder to use for those types of things. But if you own a building, just as one building for you, obviously you might pay real estate tax as cost of business, and that would be something you would stick in there. The exercise tax, this is if you're an alcohol, tobacco, and fuel industry. Trucking would be one I would say they probably have in. Not something that most areas use. But if you have it again, this is a tax that you need to have set up inside of QuickBooks under the tax bracket in order for it to be populating. Obviously, your POS system or whatever system you're using to check those type of customers out would be tracking that as well. And then once you put it in QuickBooks, you just have to make sure it's categorized properly. Personal property tax. This is for property used for trade or business. Again, kind of plays into the real estate tax if it's personal. Insurance premiums. This is a big area that has a ton of sub accounts. So insurance premiums could go back up to the employee benefit bucket. You could have health insurance in here. You could have auto insurance in here. You could have liability insurance in here for your business if you have like an umbrella policy. Um, Again, life insurance could go under there. Workers' comp could go under there. Um, the list is kind of there. Again, if you just have insurance premiums, some of those buckets you're going to want to be able to dissect and show the difference in them. So you would create sub accounts for those types of things. It's a preference up to you. Workers' comp to me, although is an insurance premium, is a payroll expense. So I tend to put that up in the payroll expense as an account underneath it. Again, the sub accounts, I'll show you how to set those up inside of QuickBooks, and we'll kind of talk about that when we're done. The self-employed health insurance, so this is if you're a sole proprietor and you're paying for medical, dental, and all those types of things. This is a different deduction on the tax form, so you have to show it in a different bucket. I encourage all owners in general to have insurance listed on a different line item, whether it's that you're self-employed or you're insuring employees. It just makes it easier for you to see it when it comes time to do the tax prep at the end of the year. Okay. Business startup costs, up to $5,000 in business startup costs. Could be advertising, openings, this type of thing. Some of this might go in as a fixed asset as the opening cost. Some of this stuff might get expensed once you're actually operating. But as an owner, when you're getting started, you need to know what that cost is that's associated. The reason I say some of it might go into the fixed asset is if you spent $5,000 on a sign to put at the road, that's an asset that's so big that you would want to depreciate it over the lifetime of the asset, which is based on the depreciation schedule. So you would want to have that as a startup cost, but obviously then it's going to be a fixed asset that you paid for as well. Okay. Some of the smaller things like buying an $800 computer is not something that's probably going to need to be depreciated. Honestly, I might not even put that in startup cost. That might be something that goes into like office supplies or office equipment. Again, these are preferences and decisions you make as an owner based on what you're trying to see and or tax guidance you're getting from whoever is your financial person. Okay. Any questions about this first page of expenses that we've gone over? William, for the real estate, yes, you can use classes. That's how it would be done inside of QuickBooks. Allie, for trucking, all I said about them is that they might be the one that uses the exercise tax with the fuel tax that they pay, the dump fees, the ODOT stuff that you have to file, that could fall into there. Dan, for the self-employed health insurance costs versus the tax deduct, if you are the only person on the insurance as the self-employed person, it actually goes on the 1040 on a different line on the tax return. So that would be why you would want to keep it separate versus if you have an employees on the health insurance. If you have employees on the health insurance, then it's just a deduction to the business. You get a better deduction self-employed to have self-employed health insurance, but um, there's no disadvantage if it's on the business because obviously it's dollar for dollar deduction wise that way. Okay. So it looks like all the questions about section 1 are answered. I will give you section 2. This is inside of the QuickBooks training PowerPoint. You guys do get a copy of this list, obviously. Skipped it. Okay. Okay, so the second round, let me move this little black bar out of the way for everybody. Move it down to the bottom here. Okay. So business bad debt. This would be like if you did work for somebody and they didn't pay you. Okay. Um, you can write it off, meaning you zero it out, void it, or put a discount in to make it negative. I see this a lot of times in like contractors, construction workers. Um, I see a lot more of this than in a lot of other industries. Obviously, um, if you don't, depending what your industry is, there's more deduction here for bad debt than others. If you're a service industry and you just never collect the money, you don't get to write off, a negative income. You just don't claim the income, but you wrote off the expense to occur the work. So if you're a landscaper, for example, and you bought mulch, put mulch down on a job and you billed somebody $200 for it and they didn't pay you, you don't claim that you took in $200, you zero it out so you didn't get any money in, and your expense or bad debt write-off is that you had to buy mulch for that job or pay labor for that job. Okay. So bad debt, there's a couple different ways, and we'll talk about it as we get into invoicing in the next class on how do we count for this in QuickBooks. I'm a big advocate of keeping the detail. That way, in 5 years, if somebody who did bad debt you comes back into your inner circle needing help again, you have record that they didn't pay you prior and either have an opportunity to try to collect on that money or choose not to take them on as a client again, obviously. Reimbursement for travel, meals, and entertainment. Entertainment is no longer deductible, just so we're on the same page. That answer is a 0. Meals, there's a couple sections of meals now. There's, if you take your team out to eat, you can deduct up to 100% of it. If you as the owner go out to meet with a potential client, you can only deduct 50% of it. Those kind of changed based on COVID and trying to help small businesses and some of that kind of thing. And then travel, obviously, you write off the full amount to travel for work. So if you have to stay in a hotel, you write off the cost of the hotel, airfare, rental car, and those types of things. For advertising, so advertising and dues and subscriptions can toggle between each other. So I want to emphasize that a little bit here. So advertising would be like if you went and bought business cards, letterheads, your website, if you're paying for Google ads, because you're running advertising, if you're running advertising on Facebook, if you had to buy yard signs, those types of things are going to be all advertising, something to get your company to get with you, right? But some of those things could be reoccurring. So like your website costs is something that you bill every month or annually, right? And so that could be a dues and subscriptions too, something that you're constantly paying for. And so that's up to you as the owner on where you want to see that information, whether you want to see it in advertising costs or if you want to see it in dues and subscriptions. Okay. Cars and truck expense. This is an area that you want to track it all, but only some of it's going to be deductible pending which way you go. So mileage plays into here, gas, repairs, registration, all that kind of stuff. But if you deduct mileage, you don't deduct gas, repairs, and registration. That is a conversation you have with your accountant at the end of the year based on what they deem the usage of your vehicle to determine what is the better deduction for you. Okay. Charitable contributions. This is something if you donate to an organization, this could be gift cards that you're donating so that somebody will come to a service with you. This could be that you bought a kid's pepperoni rolls or sponsored a baseball team. Honestly, some of this can get tucked into advertising. So if you sponsor a baseball team and they put your logo on the back of the shirt, although you did a charitable thing, they also are advertising for you. So you can deduct it on either way. A lot of accountants will tell you to try to deem more of it in advertising than charitable contributions because of the way the deductions are done. It depends on what your tax filing status is, whether you're a sole proprietor, S corp, corporation, and those types of things. Okay, but just use your judgment. If you're just giving somebody a gift card, that's not really advertisement, right? So that would be charitable. But like I said, if you sponsor a baseball team and they're putting your logo on the back of the shirt, then that could be deemed as advertising. Club dues and membership fees. This plays into dues and subscriptions, same type of thing. This could be that you have to be a member of a chamber in order to have health insurance, or you want to be a member of a chamber because you want to have access to the network and attend events. This could be that you pay for a software each month. For example, Teams, Zoom, all those types of things are softwares that you might pay on a regular basis. So that would be under memberships and club dues. Again, this could be that you do real estate, so you need to be part of the MLS. This could be your cosmetology dues that you have to pay to get your license renewed every so often. Lots of different industries that this stuff plays in there. Okay. Franchise, trademarks, and trade names. Obviously, this cost is incurred at that time of purchase. And then obviously, if you are a franchise, then you might pay a fee back based on what that franchise does for you, marketing, advertising, so on and so on. So you would have that. Sometimes these are one-time fees once you've done the trademark or trade name, and then you don't ever have them again. Obviously, franchise is a one-time purchase fee, but then you pay back whatever the cost is per month, 80, 20, whatever it breaks out to be for certain things. So you want to track that. The interview expense allowance. So obviously this is if you're trying to hire, which everybody's hiring, but nobody's hiring type of mentality. So this could be cost of posting advertisements to hire somebody on Indeed, Craigslist, Google, LinkedIn. This could be if you pay a temp agency to hire somebody for you or fill a position for you. Obviously, there's only so much you have, and then if you take a potential applicant out to eat, you have some deductions there. In closing, obviously, you see that more in corporate world than small business. Legal and professional fees. So CPAs would be professional fees. Accountants could be professional fees. Legal is obviously attorneys. If they're writing contracts for you, if there's actually a lawsuit issue you have, if you have evictions, if you're in rental, those types of things, you would have those fees. And again, some people even separate it, like they say legal and then accounting, and then professional fees could be coaching, things like that as well. Tax prep fees, again, this is what you pay whoever is filing your taxes, whether it's a CPA, a firm, if you do them yourself, then obviously you might have a software cost associated. That would be your tax prep fee. License and permits. So this is liquor license, realtor license, trade names, if you have a business license. So for those of us that have DBAs and things like that, like those need to be renewed every so often and cost money. And some of that type of stuff plays in there. Liquor license is renewed every year. Cosmetology license can be stuck in here as well. Any of those types of things that you have, if you obviously get more and more things as you grow as a business owner and have more qualifications or get additional licenses. Obviously, there's more things that'll go in there. Permits, if you work in construction, could be paying a city to pull a permit to do a building. It could be that you had to get registered in that city to be able to do a job. City of Massillon is a big one. North Canton will get you if they see you out in a branded truck. They'll stop and ask you for some of those permits and things like that. So it just depends on your industry on how much you'll use that. Obviously, license again can be car plates as well. It could be your driver's license. Again, that's a preference whether you put that in car and truck expense or you put that down in license and permit. Penalties and fines. These are actually not really deductible, so we track them separate. If you pay taxes late or don't pay them at all and get penalized and fined for them, there's that. Obviously, if you get a speeding ticket, that falls under penalties and fine, and that's not deductible either. So you want to make sure that you keep track of those separately. And obviously, for some people, if there's been issues in the past that it wasn't your error, it was somebody else's error that caused you penalties and fines, you want to track it to keep track of how much money that person costs you if you're in some sort of litigation or anything to try to recoup some of those expenses, obviously. Repairs. So I call it repairs and maintenance. Repairs is fine, obviously. This is things like painting, cleaning, roof repairs, plumbing, fixing, things like that. When you get into major repairs, like big assets, anything over $2,500 is usually about our standard. Then you can stick it in repairs, but odds are your accountant's going to need more information on that to make sure that if it's something that needs to be depreciated or added to the value of another asset you own, such as a building, and you need to then, let's say you put a roof on it, that would be an asset that you don't get to take the $10,000 you spent on it right then and there. You take the 10,000 over the course of the life of the rest of the building. So some of those things to keep a little bit separate. But obviously, again, if you stick it all in there and you look at it as an accountant and say, oh my gosh, there's like $30,000 in here, then you just have a little office, then they're going to look at it and go, well, what's in here? What are the big dollar amount items? And then you just pull those and give them that. Subscriptions again plays into club dues and memberships. This is anything that you might be subscribed to, newsletters, Netflix, Spotify for radio, any educational series, those types of things could be your subscriptions. Supplies and materials. This one can be broke up too. Obviously, there's office supplies, cleaning supplies, there's job supplies. any of those types of things that you want to see. It's basically anything you need to continue to run as a business. So for me here, it's going to be paper, ink, printers, computers, those types of things. Utilities, we kind of talked about Spectrum as being my utility that I like to track. As you guys know, some of the times these guys like to raise the prices on them. Trash is another one, Kimball, Republic, those types of things. You run out of contract and your bill goes up a lot. So you want to pay attention to it. So you might create sub accounts of some of these utilities. When it comes to home office utilities, most of the time I don't encourage business owners to put it inside of QuickBooks, because I don't want to confuse whoever does the tax prep at the end of the year that you've already factored their percentage, and then they try to factor their percentage again and you've lost the proper deduction. So that would be a communication thing for you. But obviously, if you paid it out of the business, it can go into utilities and we can do the factorization properly. There's some loopholes in the home office deduction, meaning that obviously you can write off your utilities at home, but if you're using QuickBooks Online, what's the one utility you have at home that you can't run your business without? Internet. Therefore, I would give you 100% of the internet deduction instead of making you do it based on square footage of your house type of thing. Cell phone, again, we all use our cell phones for work most of the time, so you would want to write off your bill. That should be under its own line item. As you see, the next line is the telephone line. So some of these things kind of tie into the home office deduction, but obviously it's the way it's tracked inside of QuickBooks. That is going to be really what's important. Mileage is another thing QuickBooks offers to track, but doesn't really show on your financials. So that changes your numbers at the end of the year. And again, we'll kind of look at that later on in the classes. So telephone, this is who you're paying to have a phone. So this could be a landline, it could be your cell phone, whatever you're using for communication purposes. Depreciable assets, this would be big purchases, equipment, big office expense, buildings, vehicles, those types of things. Anything over $2,500 is about the status we tell people, based on the size of your business, is things that are going to go in there. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take the deduction in full in the first year, but it's considered a fixed asset. Okay. Any questions about page 2? Carla, that not all of these are going to be in QuickBooks until you set them up. That is correct. Steve, it's potential clients, not active clients. An active client could be 100% deductible. It's a potential client that would be 50% deductible. Joanne, I will have to look at that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't work with very many organizations that have the in-kind donations right now, but we can look that up and get back to you about that. Says we have a couple questions in the Q&A section. So let me go over to Q&A, guys. Yes, it's okay to combine legal and professional and tax prep all into one. Okay, I think I've covered all of that. So let's go to the last page of the categorizations here. Not nearly as big, obviously. So payments to contractors. This is anybody that is not considered to be on your staff and works at their own leisure and their own time, and you pay them a fee based on whatever work is completed. Virtual assistants, design firms, marketing firms. This could be a bookkeeper, those types of things. Obviously, anybody that's paid over $600, it should be issued a tax document at the end of the year. So you should have information on these people. But again, there are people that work at their own leisure based on project-based work. Okay. Home office, we've kind of talked about this. If you're eligible, it's based on a percentage of the deductions for the following things. Utilities, real estate taxes, insurance deductible, mortgage interest, those types of things. Home office is only beneficial if your business is profitable. Okay. Your business has to show that it made money in order for it to be beneficial. 401k plans, obviously, these are things that you could do for your employees, whether it's a 401k with a match or no match. You could do IRAs, those types of things. You would track it. This could be offered to employees or only to owners. It depends on how you have it set up. Some of these things can be backdated, meaning that you could set them up and then realize you need the savings. So you could pay the money in the next year for the previous year to get the deduction as long as it's done before the tax is filed. Client gifts purchased for clients are deductible up to $25. So if you buy a $50 gift, you only get to deduct 25 of it. So gift wisely is what we tell people. Obviously, again, if your gift has your brand on it, it could be stuck in advertising as well. And then continuing education. This could be seminars, things like you're doing today. Just any of those fees that you might have to grow your business. This could be business coaching. This could be that you went to a seminar, those types of things, obviously. So some of these expenses, like we've talked about, are in QuickBooks already. A majority of them might not be, and we're going to have to set them up as we start working through our transactions. Okay. Looks like we have a couple more questions. So let me take a peek and see what we've got in here. Larry, I won't touch anything with the nonprofits until the nonprofit class. So that's the last Thursday in September. As far as where stuff should be categorized for event fees, there's a lot of options here. We'll start to talk about that as we get into categorizing some of those things. Brianna, if you rent the home, can you still deduct the insurance being paid? Do you mean like you're a landlord or you're renting from somebody else? It's 25 per customer. The Intuit fee can be categorized however you see fit. I tend to just do bank fees, but you could put it under invoice payment fee or something else. That's a personal preference. If you're renting from somebody and have renter's insurance, yes, it can still be deductible based on square footage for home office. If you have a Google Voice number, you would deduct the cost of that plus a percentage of your cell phone usage. Okay. So it looks like the rest of the questions are in more detail that we're going to go into in the next section here. Okay. So let's talk about actually categorizing now. So I'm going to go back and make sure you guys can see my QuickBooks screen now inside of the software. Okay. So we're on the screen now where we sync the bank account. So we have transactions that we need to categorize now. Okay. So we're going to talk about actually categorizing these. So if I scroll down, you'll see you have 3 tabs: for review, categorize, and excluded. There's nothing in this categorize tab yet because we haven't categorized anything and we haven't deleted anything yet. Okay. odds are, unless there's an overlap of data, you're not really going to exclude anything. Okay. So down here in the for review are all the items that have come through on my credit card based on my charge ability. Okay. Some of the names you might recognize, some of them you might not. Some of them QuickBooks is going to recognize, some of them QuickBooks is not. Okay. So when you look at the description and the category, it might not actually always make sense. Okay. So for example, I live in Portage Lakes, Ohio, and Pix is a restaurant that we have around the corner from us that actually just closed on Monday. So this description here was Pix. So I would type in Pix is going to be my vendor. And then QuickBooks calls it meals and entertainment. That is the proper bucket for it. Pix is a restaurant that I ate at before they closed. And so it's meals for me. Okay. Circle K. Circle K is a gas station. So Circle K is populating and it's trying to put it in car and truck expense. Sadly, I know for $3.51, I did not buy gas because gas is way more expensive than that. Okay. So this was actually probably me getting a coffee, would be my guess. So I'm going to stick this actually under meals and entertainment because it wasn't a big enough charge to say that I got gas. Okay. Now, these are things that I would know because this is my credit card, right? So you would know your stuff based on what you spent, whether it's going to be gas or not. Okay. Now, this Marathon, again, Marathon is a gas station. I spent $69.79. That's probably actually gas. So I'm going to stick that in car and truck. Okay. Now, if you've noticed now, things are starting to change. So everything that went green now tried to change it. Okay. But this $7 is not gas. This $5 is probably not gas, right? But this $26, that's probably gas. Okay. $2.99 is not gas. So it's going to constantly be changing these things as we're starting to categorize it because QuickBooks is trying to help you because part of QuickBooks Online is being smart, okay, in this process. Subway, again, it says it's meals and entertainment. So if I click on Subway, it gives me the vendor, it's in the proper bucket, and I would click add. Okay. Now, what is this data doing? This data then is coming out of this list and going into our reports that we looked at that didn't have anything before. Now it's going to have some stuff, okay? So here's another one, GoDaddy. GoDaddy, again, is a web hosting, either domain thing. You could have email addresses through it. You could host your website through it, right? So GoDaddy and QuickBooks recognizes it to know that it should be advertising and marketing, which is where I would want it. So I can add that transaction. Now, as you're going through this, you see I'm just kind of jumping around to give you guys a couple examples and showing you how the module works, right? You could do this very easily and click description, and it's going to put them in alphabetical order. So all your Acmes are here, all your Akron families are here, all your Circle Ks are going to populate right there. And the list goes on, right? Here's all my GoDaddies. So now I could technically click Now I've selected 14 transactions and I can hit accept because they're all GoDaddy. They all are in the right bucket for me. And now they're all gone, right? Home Depot, this would be repairs. So let's see if we have repairs in here. So repairs and maintenance is actually an account in here, okay? I would want to put my vendor as Home Depot. And then I can click add. Now you'll see those Home Depots all change to repairs and maintenance. Now this one's not $2,500, so I can still stick it in repairs and maintenance. And again, because I have a bunch of them that are exactly the same, I can select on there and hit accept and they all get entered in. Now, if you look now under the categorize tab, all the things that I've been categorizing with you guys are showing in this tab, okay? Now you have to do this for all of your transactions every month, okay? When you're starting something this late in the year, you have a lot of data that you need to do because it's this late in the year, you're 9 months in, right? You're going to do the same thing for the bank account. And I'm going to flip it around and start the other way. Let's start with the W's and the Z's, okay? So Westfield Insurance. So this would be one that I would want to type in Westfield. And then this would be one that I probably want to put a new account in place. Okay, so this Westfield Insurance is liability insurance, okay? So I would create this account. So over here, it's going to be an expense. The detail account is going to be insurance. And then liability insurance. And now it comes up and now I can click add. Verizon, this is going to be telephone, which looks like we don't have either. So let's create this one. Again, it's going to be an expense. You could technically still stick it under utility, but just name it telephone. So you'll see like some of it, obviously it picks up and some of it doesn't. Speedway, $92. Yep, that's definitely gas. So here's one that's kind of a good one to look at. You have paychecks tax, you have paychecks here, and then you have another paychecks. So paychecks is a payroll service that he uses. So this payroll tax here, you would have to split this transaction and put whatever was the company portion versus the employer portion. These $34 ones are their invoice. It tells you right here in the description. So that's how you would know what that was. And that could be under legal and professional fee, or you could do a payroll processing fee. And then this one, that's the actual payroll, which again, you see here in the description, would be under wages. So you have a couple different buckets, but it's all the same vendor. So every time you change one of these, it's going to change all of them, right? Most payroll services, paychecks, ADP, Ahola, Paycor, Gusto, the list goes on, right? Pull the money in a couple different sections so that you can categorize it appropriately as the business owner, okay? So that's how we categorize everything that we've integrated, okay? So now, how do we enter it if, like, we were only able to go back to June, right? So what do I do to enter the stuff that isn't in here? So for my bank account over here, you could go to a couple places. You can go to bank register right here. And it's going to bring you in to show you the things that you've already categorized. The only thing that populates in the register is the things you've categorized from the previous screen. If you have not categorized it, the data does not show in QuickBooks. It's not on your reports. It's not in your ledger. It does not exist until you categorize it, okay? For a manual transaction, see this gray bar right here that says add check with the little down arrow. You would click on this. You would change your date. I'm going to go back to January. Okay, January 1st. I am not doing a check, so technically I should select down here and do an expense instead of a check so that it doesn't ask for a check number, right? And then I could still say Marathon is my vendor. And it's going to auto populate with something that may or may not be real. And I did $50 even, and it is a car and truck expense, okay? And then I can hit save. Now that transaction populates down here. You could do the same thing for a deposit. To show a deposit, you could put a customer name in. Income is sales. So I'm going to do and I'm going to say he paid me $1,500, and I'm going to say that this is supposed to be income, and this is for services. I'm gonna add a customer and then hit save. And again, see how it populates down here. So the manual entry this way is time consuming. The goal of QuickBooks Online is to not to have to actually do this. Okay. Now, the other way to do this is to import transactions. So just because I wasn't able to download that far back in QuickBooks doesn't mean I can't download it from the actual credit card provider. Okay. So, for example, if I go into Capital One, and this is different for every bank, so just kind of roll with me, is that this is just who we're using bank wise right now, obviously. So, and I click into the account, and there are more account services, and you can select download transactions. It would be a QBO for QuickBooks, and then I can do a custom date range. Oh one, oh one, two. I'm gonna go to 6/8 because that was the date it allowed me to go to. Hang on, it wants me to start here to 6/8. Got it. Okay. Hit done. And then I can hit export. Now it's downloaded it for me in the format I needed it to be, QuickBooks, right? And I can go back over here, and under this gear icon, I can go to import data. And then what do you want to import? I want to import bank data because that's what we're working with. And then there's my download from today. Only it's not allowing me to select the account I want. Let's try this again. All right, let's try. Import data. Let's try one more time, see if it'll let me do it. It's supposed to allow you to select the credit card here, the Capital One card, and for some reason it's not letting me do it, so I don't. We'll come back to it in just a second. Let me hit refresh on here. QuickBooks sometimes has its little quirks. It is a web-based platform, obviously, that they're constantly making better and better. So sometimes it's just a little squirrely here. There it goes. So now, if you give it a minute, it will update and have all that data I downloaded. It's going to need to now be put in. So the transactions should go from 88 to a lot, right? Because I'm 217. And it goes back to January. So that saves me, because that bank happened to have the ability for me to download all the way back to January instead of having to manually enter. Not everyone is that great. I will tell you, PNC only lets you download 90 days in the past, and that's it. So you would have to manually enter everything else. Okay. It looks like we have some questions, so let me go see what we've got in here. Yes, whether it says confirm or add is totally okay. That might just be because they're updating the portal constantly. So some of the things might even look a little bit different than the images in the PowerPoint, but it all has the same type of buttons. Yep, so you're good there. let's see here. Carla, that's totally okay if you categorize it that way. Again, it's more about you understanding where the data is, not me. We just go over generalizations with that. I recommend having some receipts if you need them, meaning if the transaction was like a withdraw from the bank and you don't know what it was for, but on the receipt you happen to write yourself a cheat sheet note, absolutely. You also will go over later that you can create receipts inside of QuickBooks Online. Obviously, QuickBooks Online is a mobile app and can be on an iPad, so you have some ability to do that as well. I do always tie my receipts to my statements if I'm given them. So yes, Deb, these transactions did auto-populate due to the credit card being synced or aligned with QuickBooks. Doug, I didn't make it a sub-account because I categorized it under insurance. So when we look at the profit and loss, you'll see that all the insurances will be grouped together and give you a total insurance without needing to create sub-accounts. We'll go over that as we look at the reports here in a few minutes. Bill, you're not required to save receipts, though I do encourage it. Obviously, as long as it's not a cash transaction, you have some semblance of a receipt through a statement. No, Louise, I do as little manual as possible. I do all the QuickBooks, like I said, online is designed for the integration feature. So the goal is to do as little manual entry as possible inside of here if you can avoid it. The internal bank transfers, if both accounts are listed in QuickBooks, you just transfer it to the other account as a transfer. We'll get into that more as we're kind of looking at some of that as we get into the next class and stuff like that. Yes, Antonio, that is correct. Carla, if your insurance is included in your mortgage payment at the end of the year, you did a statement that tells you what the breakdown of those are, and or you get an packet from your insurance agency to tell you what your insurance cost was for the year. Gail, that's a question specifically for whomever does your taxes, because technically that's considered commuting, and commuting itself is not a deduction. Mileage to go to the PO box to check it, or go to the store to buy office supplies, or go to lunch to meet with a customer is the mileage you deduct, not driving to and from your office every day. Tim, if you enter them manually and then download from the bank, yes, there is a matching categorization. Usually this plays into deposits, which we haven't talked about yet. You could also just exclude those transactions from QuickBooks because you already have them in QuickBooks. But somewhere, yes, if you're doing manual entry and then downloading, there would be some redundancy there. Carla, I don't have a one-on-one session planned, but you can reach out to me directly and we can either go over your questions briefly or set up something personally. The basic QuickBooks is designed more for the business terminology, where the nonprofit QuickBooks not only is cheaper, but has the nonprofit features such as budgeting, actual, and then the types of reports that you're looking for in a nonprofit. So that's the difference there. Jamie, we will talk about editing, deleting in the next class. If it's all one business, it's a preference onto you whether you want more than one bank account or credit card. Doug, Apple Cards is not something I have a ton of experience with, but it's just like a credit card, so it should import, no problem. There isn't really a best bank or credit card for downloading. We'll talk about tagging in the next class. Yes, Pamela, you can download using Excel from Bank of America. Well, Bank of America does integrate. I just don't know how far back it lets you go. Yes, you can upload documents under the transactions, the receipts. Yep, we'll talk about that in a later class. It's categorized by date that it cleared the bank account. If you go under transactions to get to the bank register, go to bank register. It's blue on the right-hand side. I think you can get to it from here too. Nope, it's this one. But the blue right here. No, if you use buckets, it shouldn't change what the QuickBooks sees. All right, let me go over to Q&A, check a couple other things, and then we'll dive into our last couple sections here. Okay. So we're going to talk about creating rules. So in the chat earlier, somebody had mentioned that rules and stuff help make the entry a lot easier. They're right, it does. But there is a time and a place for rules, okay? Rules are things that never change. Rent, your rent would never change. It's always going to be a rent expense. A lease on a car is never going to change. It's always going to be a lease expense. Your utilities, spectrum, internet, telephone, never going to change. Always going to be those expenses. Things you don't want to create rules for are like gas stations. Like I showed you, my Circle K charge or my Marathon charge that was only a couple dollars is not auto and truck expense. So if I had created a rule for that vendor, it would go to auto and truck expense, but that's not where it goes, right? Because it was food, not those types of things. So you want to create those expenses for things that reoccur over and over and over again, okay? So over here, we're still in our transactions tab. If you go to rules right here, you can go to rules and you can create a new rule and you can name all of this stuff, okay? Tell it what expense to go to, what to go through. You could tell it to automatically confirm this rule or not, all right? I am not a big automatically confirm it because if I create a rule by accident, I don't want it to automatically put the data in, meaning I don't ever see it in this screen right here where we see all this data. If it automatically enters, it goes directly into this categorize tab and you'll never see it, okay? You'll see it on your financials, but if it was to be wrong, that would be where you would find that it was wrong, okay? So I'm going to try to get it to prompt to create a rule for us. So again, I'm going to click on Home Depot and I'm going to click add because it's a repair and maintenance. And I'm going to click add again on another Home Depot. And let me find another one down here for Home Depot. Oh, it's not going to prompt me. Usually after 2 or 3 of the same transaction, it prompts you for a rule. Nope, it's not going to do it. Let me try another one. GoDaddy. Oh, okay. So we'll go here. Let's create a rule this way. Let's do Home Depot. Money out of all banks. You could also just select a bank if you wanted to. And then we want to assign it as an expense to repairs and maintenance. The payee is Home Depot. And then we're going to hit save. Home Depot. And now you'll see the rule is here. And I have it to auto add. So if I go back to bank transactions now, as you can see, my number has drastically changed. And if I try to find Home Depot, there should be none that populate. There's a few. So it caught almost all of them. And these ones are under uncategorized, which is why it probably didn't do that. And if I go to categorize, now you'll see that there's lots and lots of Home Depots. And to say green, auto added with rule, means that these were the ones that it automatically put in for me. Okay. Now, if you create a rule and you did it wrong, or you decide after playing with the rules you don't want a rule anymore, right? You go into rules and you can edit this rule. Edit, make any changes to it. Like if I don't want it to auto add anymore, I can save that change because like I said, I don't want it to auto add. If I want to disable or delete, disable means it won't implement, but it's still here. Delete means you're going to delete it completely and it's not going to exist, like you never had created the rule. Okay. If you want to copy the rule and then obviously edit it to other names, you could do that. Now you might have rules for the same vendor for multiple locations. For example, if you go to Wendy's and you go to Wendy's in Ohio and then you go to Wendy's in Florida, right? There are 2 different back end codes when it comes through your bank account based on whoever they use for processing. And so you would have 2 rules for Wendy's because it wouldn't recognize that the Wendy's in Florida would be the same Wendy's as the one in Ohio. Okay. So you could have rules with the same name for the same vendor multiple times because it would have multiple locations. All right. You'll find out that you're a creature of habit and that you go to a lot of the same gas stations, grocery stores, those types of things over and over and over again. So a lot of your rules will stay in place, but just know that there could be a chance where you have to create additional rules. Okay. You could export your rules and you can import rules. So if you do rules in desktop, you can bring that data through. It's not the easiest thing in the world to come through. And then usually after going through categorizing, if you categorize 5 or 6 of the same, like I'm going to move Acme is a grocery store. So this is owner's draw or owner's pay. I'm going to see if I can get it to prompt to create a rule. Because usually after accepting the same vendor multiple times, it will ask you to create a rule. And it brings up the wizard right on this screen. But it's making a liar out of me right now, apparently. You could also create a rule if you click on it. Create a rule. It's right in the gray part of it. It's going to bring up the same wizard we just worked with, obviously. Only it filled some of it in for you, where we had to fill all of this in last time. So again, we talked about there's a lot of different ways that you can create and do things in QuickBooks. Creating a rule, you can do it from this chart. You can do it from clicking on a transaction. You can do it from it prompting you after you've entered the same transaction multiple times. Okay. Any questions about creating rules or why we would use them even? If you delete a rule, it does not impact the history, no. You can deduct things like coffee and lunch. The deduction depends on if you are with employees or without, whether it's 100% or 50% deductible. Michelle, I'm not sure what you mean. Can you go over when the box has the numbers such as, can you give me a little more detail? I can help you if you want to reach out about setting up all this information for your business. Every entry in your bank account needs to be categorized in order to be able to reconcile. You can categorize from your phone or on an iPad. There is an app that you can download. You can have the rules categorize and add or just categorize. That depends on what you choose to do. Excuse me. Okay, so Michelle, you're talking about this, the 197. When you go from an individual transaction to a group of payees, all I did was click this description to put them in alphabetical order. You could put them back in date order if you prefer. You can put them in dollar amount order as well if you're looking for something specific. But all it is these headers help you navigate that. So for review are the transactions that you need to add. Categorize means you already added them and they populate in the financial statements. Bill, you would look under the profit and loss and pull it by class to make sure stuff is properly categorized. If classes aren't being used, it would show as unclassified. You could also pull a P&L by detail. PayPal is its own animal that, Adam, we would need to kind of talk about on its own. Okay, looks like I answered all of those. Let me just check the Q&A too. Okay, I think I've answered everything so far. Okay, so and then obviously one of the things we talked about was importing transactions, which we did when we imported the bank account stuff. So I went out of order a little bit for that one. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about today is we're going to go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint here. I'm going to give you guys my direct contact info. So my email address here, feel free to email. That's my phone number. You can text or call. And then obviously my web address. A lot of you guys in this process will have some individual questions. And as you can tell, I try to reference different industries based on who I know is kind of on the call, engaging some of the questions so that you guys can interpret it back to your industry. But as you get into more specific things by banks you use or credit cards, Apple Pay, PayPal, those types of things, those are things that I can help you on your own. Obviously, if some of you think you need additional support post this, the training seminar, feel free to reach out to me as well. We can always talk about what your needs are and see what I can't do to help you guys. And obviously, Canton Score has references as well. So we have another class next week. The class next week, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second so I can pull up PowerPoint here. So in the next class, we're going to talk about reconciling. We're going to work more with categorizations, with entering bills, paying bills, and printing checks. Some of that might be more for a bigger organization, not a small mom and pop shop. We're going to talk about creating invoices and the items being mapped in the appropriate format for you. We're going to review reports because we have some transactions completed at that point. We're going to talk about the matching, which somebody had brought up earlier. We're going to talk about creating and editing items, and then your customer and vendor management is what's lined up for our next course, okay? If you guys have any additional questions, you can feel free to leave them in the chat. I will do my best to kind of scroll through and answer them with the couple minutes we have left. Otherwise, if you want to email me directly with any of those questions, I'm happy to take a peek at them and see if I can answer them. And then Gwen, if you would post the PowerPoint, seems like people are asking for that. And I don't know if it's easier for us to post it or send it out in an email.
I've posted it a couple of times, Anne, but I'll do it one more time.
I know there's a lot in the chat, so I don't know. And then I have a couple questions in here, Gwen. Do they need to register for the second class separately?
Yes, each
Okay.
each of the 4 classes requires a separate registration. But we will be sending out the PowerPoint and the recording as soon as we get it posted to our website.
Brooke, we'll talk about the check images on the next class when we're looking at the more detail about the categorization and reconciliation aspect of it.
The courses are at score.org/Canton. You should see all of the QuickBooks courses there, but I'll have a link to that when I send out the slides and the recording.
When somebody's asking if they can only attend part of the session next week, if they would still have access to the PowerPoint and recording.
Yes, at that we'll still make sure they get a copy
Okay.
of the things.
Perfect. Tammy, there isn't a payroll course scheduled. It is something that SCORE is, and I have been in conversations about, but we don't have anything scheduled for it yet. Perfect, guys. Well, then I will let us jump off just a few minutes early. Doesn't look like we have anything too crazy in the chat other than everybody logging off. So if you need anything else, feel free to reach out directly to us or Canton Score, and I will talk to you guys next week.
Okay, with that, we'll close out the webinar. See you next week.